Okay. So today we're going to go over probably one of my favorite EDH decks that came from a Precon, which is really nice. And that is Sidar Jabari of Zhalfir. For those of you who don't know, this came from the Cavalry Charge Precon from March of the Machines. There is it's a really fun deck. It's very straightforward, and there's a good frame to make it a great deck. And it only takes a few key upgrades in order to like really make this deck sing. And you can pop off like really easily with this deck. And there's not a whole lot, there's not a lot of gimmicks. There's not a lot of like specific cards that you have to pull in order to really make this deck work. It's just like it has a solid foundation. It does need a little bit of catering in order to like really make it work, but it doesn't take much. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off is the commander itself, Sidar Jabari of Zhalfir. It's a 4/3 flying with first strike, and it is in Esper colors. When it has eminence, which means that as long as it's on the battlefield or in the command zone, this ability will trigger whenever you attack with one or more knights. If it is in the command zone or in the battlefield, you get to loot for one. So you get to draw a card and then you discard a card. And what this allows you to do is you get to basically cater your hand to like what you need at the time, and you can also begin dumping knights into the graveyard for his second ability, which is whenever Sidar Jabari does combat damage to a player, return target knight creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And this is a really powerful mechanic because now you get to cheat knights from your graveyard onto the battlefield way faster than you would normally be able to put them out. And because you're constantly attacking with knights, you're able to keep the cards that you need in your hand, discard the cards that you don't want, and then as soon as he is out on the battlefield, he starts swinging. It's very easy to attack with and also deal combat damage to a player because both of the flying and the first strike. Being 4 mana and a 4/3 with flying is pretty amazing, as well as having his other abilities. So very solid commander. The sub commander is Alonda and Azor. They are 3 mana with Esper colors. They are flying, Ward 2. Whenever they attack, you may pay X plus Esper, and then draw X cards. And then at the beginning of each end step, you may pay 4 life. If you do, you create a number of 1/1 Black Vampire Knight creature tokens with lifelink equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn. It is important to note that it is at each end step that you can trigger this, but generally it's going to be on your turn. The X plus Esper is a little expensive, so you're probably only going to be drawing about 3 cards, especially because it has to be during your combat phase. And but you can get a lot of Vampire Knights out onto the battlefield with lifelink. That 4 life is not very costly for something like that, and you'll see there's a lot of ways that you can draw several cards, especially on your turn, that is really going to make Alonda and Azor like really pop off. I will say that while they're both good commanders, it makes a lot more sense to put the prime Sidar Jabari onto the command zone because of his eminence ability. Alonda and Azor have their place, but like I don't think they're much better off in the 99. So, but as you can see here, this is the Precon list right now. It is very heavily creature focused. We have 32 creatures, 7 sorceries, 6 instants, 13 artifacts. Most of them are mana rocks, 2 enchantments, and then 39 lands. So, if you wanted to, hey 3, how you doing? If you wanted to play with this deck, and you kind of like play around with it and see how it does, kind of get a feel for it, the first thing I would recommend is that you fix the mana base. It seems like Wizards of the Coast is absolutely allergic to giving any precon a decent mana base. Arcane Sanctum, good tri-land. It's not the best, obviously, but you know it is a decent tri-land. I'm glad that they actually put that in there. Choked Estuary, they put in the reveal lands. So Choked Estuary and Port Town, you have to reveal a card, a land card in your hand that is of those colors. Those I'm not a fan of, but I can see their place. They're much better at the beginning of the game where you actually have those lands out or like in your hand still, so you can bring them out with untapped. Shine Shadow Snarl obviously is the third one. And then you have stuff like Exotic Orchard, which at 3 colors, I can kind of see it being relevant. Path of Ancestry is actually a really good card. Allows you to scry with when you cast a creature type, and I think all of your creatures are knights. So that's really good. You get to scry 1. I do not like the scry temples. So you have all 3 scry temples here. I'm not a big fan of like. I would much rather have an untapped land than being able to scry 1. That's just me. Maybe you might have a different experience, especially when you're drawing in the 99. But I just don't feel that it. I would much rather have an untapped land. Sunken Hollow is actually pretty decent. You do have a good chunk of basics here. It becomes less relevant as you replace a lot of the basics for non-basic lands. And then you have stuff like Temple of the False God. Temple of the False God absolutely has no reason to be here. This deck is generally low to the ground, and you don't need a lot of colorless mana, like at all. And this is an empty card until you have 5 lands. So, Temple of the False God would be the first thing that I would replace. I also do not like the Thriving lands here. They make a little bit more sense if you have like 2 colors, because then you just name the other color. But like they only make sense at the beginning of the game, and then if you choose the wrong color, then you just screw yourself. So say you have an island, a Thriving Hearth, and then no swamps, and then you name black. It comes into play tapped, and then the next 3 turns you draw 3 swamps. Well, then that's completely useless, and you wish that you called for blue instead. So I do not like these cards either. So Temple of the False God, Thrivings, and then I would start looking at the temples as well. And then the same with Myriad Landscape. This is fine, but it's just so much slower than Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds, which you have both of. There's no reason to have Myriad Landscape. It's so much slower. You get 2 basics of the same type. It's just not a great card, especially like in 3 colors. Like you don't want to You don't need this. So then we get in the enchantments, we have like two really good enchantments here. Don't get me wrong, these are really good enchantments. I just prefer to have more enchantments here, and like I think that these knights have a lot of really good enchantments. I kept both of these in here. So Chivalric Alliance allows you, hey Ace, to you draw a card whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures. You have knights; they're really good. They have good stats. Generally, you're just going to be attacking with 2 creatures or more every turn. So you're going to get to draw additional cards, and then you can also you have an ability to discard to create a 2/2 knight with vigilance if you need an additional knight, if there was a board wipe or something like that. Same with this one. Knight's Charge allows you to, whenever a knight attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. This is a knight, so if you have 10 knights, all of a sudden there's a 10 life swing coming. And then there is an additional 8 mana contingency plan in case there was a board wipe. You return all knights from the graveyard to the battlefield. If something happens and you're unable to stall the board wipe, you have an ability to bring them all back. Artifacts, like I said before, there is a lot of mana rocks in here. I get the need for mana rocks. Personally, I think that there's a lot of artifact hate. So if, for instance, you're using a specific mana rock for a color, someone is going to hate on it, and then you're going to be screwed. So I'm not as big of a fan of mana rocks. Obviously, Arcane Signet, Soul Ring are really good, but I think that there are some better cards here. Conjurer's Mantle is really good. Herald's Horn is also really good. Vanquisher's Banner, it is costly, but allowing you to draw cards. And then Sigiled Sword of Valoran is also really good. Being able to create 2/2 knights with vigilance that are attacking. Orzhov Signet, I think this was one of the last cards that I actually cut on here. But it's just like, once you just fix the mana base, you do not need all of these mana rocks. The other thing, and one of the other reasons why I don't like having all these mana rocks in this deck is because you want to take advantage of your commander's eminence ability as much as possible. And so you want to be putting out knights out onto the battlefield turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, so that you have as much looting done and knights into your graveyard so that you can take advantage of your commander at the when he comes out. You can't do that if you're constantly putting mana rocks down. So that is my feeling. Take that as you will. Instance, we have Despark. We have a lot of removal. This is not Ashling. This is just Sidar Jabari. Different decks require different fixing. So we have a lot of single target removal. Here we have Path to Exile, Swords to Polishes, obviously white mana. We also have Return to Dust. So this is artifact and enchantment exiling. Very nice. Despark. Yeah, like also a card that I was thinking about keeping and then I ultimately got rid of. I'll talk about it later. I don't like the fact that it's limited to mana 4 value or greater. Yeah, that is something that you could usually find something that is going to be like Darksteel Colossus is going to be like something, a prime target for this spell. But you already have 2 exilers. So, excuse me. And then we have our protection spell, Unbreakable Formation. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn if it's during your main phase, which I don't know why you would ever play it on your main phase. You get a +1/+1 counter and vigilance. Like, I don't think that this is ever going to be something relevant, but it is there. Lastly, you have pull from tomorrow, draw X cards, and discard a card. It does fit the theme of this deck, but I think that there are easier ways to draw cards. Especially with it being instant, you would want to, I don't know, it makes a little bit more sense with all the mana rocks in here because you could tap out all the mana rocks, +2 blue mana at your end step, and then just draw a bunch of cards. I don't know. It just didn't feel right in this deck. There are definitely more, better decks that would take more advantage of this. So, as for sorceries, we have Distant Melody. Great card if you have a lot of knights out, but it is sorcery speed and it's 4 mana. Fell the Mighty is a board wipe. Painful Truths, also a really good card. I just don't think that it makes sense in this deck. I think there's just better ways to draw cards here. I'll talk about that later. It is a really good card though, so I would not. I completely understand keeping this card in here. It just didn't feel right in this deck. I really wanted to focus on the knights, just getting as many knights out as possible, and just popping off in other ways, and not having to deal yes, there is a sub theme of drawing cards in this deck. I think there's just better ways to do it than Painful Truths. Path of the Enigma, same thing. It's 5 mana, sorcery speed, draw 4 cards. Okay, cool. But you're gonna be tapping out just to draw 4 cards, and then you won't be able to do much for your turn. Promise of Loyalty is also a really terrible card. It's a board wipe, and it makes sense if there's some sort of partner or grouping. So one person has a lot, a very wide board, and all of them synergize together. But typically that doesn't happen. Usually there's one card or one creature that they absolutely want to have still on the battlefield, and this basically just allows them to keep that one creature, and then everything else gets sacrificed. So generally everyone's best creature is going to be still on the battlefield by playing this. And so what are you really getting for 5 mana? So this is just not a very good card. You hamstring yourself unless you play something like Unbreakable Formation, and then everyone still has their best creatures out. Read the Bones is another. It's same with Painful Truths, but you get to scry, and then Time Wipe, return a creature, then you to its owner's hand, then destroy all creatures. Again, I guess it's a little bit better than Promise of Loyalty, but again, it's 5 mana for a board wipe. You just get to keep a creature, and the whole point of this deck is to go wide and then attack, draw cards, and then cheat out your knights. So I'm not going to go over every single one of these creatures. There's a lot of them, but I'm going to just kind of talk about the ones that I cut, and they're largely the more expensive knights and the ones that are legendary, because they don't make sense in the context of this deck. So one thing that I wanted to do about this deck was I needed to fix the mana base, and then I wanted to fix the curve, because the curve is all over the place. And I think the reason was they thought was you could cheat out cards, but I don't know. It was kind of all over the place. It definitely made sense because there is a lot of synergies with all of these knights. It's just that they had there were some odd choices here. So first to be cut was Arva the Cursed. It's a 3/3 legendary for 5 mana with Death Touch and Lifelink. Other legendary creatures you control get +2/+2. There's not a whole lot of legendary creatures in this deck. There are a few, but like you don't. This is not a legendary deck. So 5 mana for a 3/3 doesn't make any sense. Obviously, you can dump him, but then all you're getting is a 3/3 Death Touch Lifelinker that makes your legendary creatures a little bit bigger. Aethersworn Adjudicator. Also, like a very large creature here. 5 mana for a flying 4/4. You can pay 3 tap, destroy target creature and enchantment. Or you can pay 3 mana and untap Aethersworn Adjudicator. This is a really... It's really good in certain situations. But it also is just going to get a lot of hate. So I kind of just felt like, yeah, like it's good, but you would have to cheat him out. And then really, you couldn't ever attack with him because like really you would always just be worried about, well, I need him untapped so that I can destroy something. I'm not going to have 6 mana available to untap him just to then tap and destroy something. So that was just kind of my thought process. Plus, there's a lot of other ways to just destroy other targets. You have these exiles and everything else. Exsanguinator Cavalry. I don't remember if I actually kept that. Falmir Knight. I actually thought about keeping here, but it's a 1/1 Death Toucher, and generally you don't want to. The way that I saw it was that you want to attack with your knights as much as possible, and the early knights you want to attack and make it difficult for your opponents to block. Death Touch usually is better as a defender, and so you have a less of a reason to. Oh my goodness. Just getting all of the distractions here. So generally you're just not going to be attacking with him, you're going to be defending with him because like someone will just block with something that they don't care about, and then all of a sudden you lose your 1/1 Death Toucher. Also the Profane Insight, 3 mana for drawing a card, not as good. I wasn't really a big fan of the adventure cards, and I don't think I kept any of them. I think I kept one of them. Hagon, really good. Herald of Hoofbeats, really good. Hero of Bladehold, really good. Josu Vez, I was very underwhelmed by this card. So it's a 4 mana 4/5 with Menace, so decent stat line. And then it has a kicker, which means that you can only pay the kicker cost if you play it from your hand. And then, so you pay 10 mana for 4/5 with Menace, and then you get 8 2/2 black zombie knights with Menace. And it's like, no, this makes no sense. Like, no, this isn't synergized with the rest of the deck. The whole point of this deck is to cheat out knights. At no point would I ever hope to be in a spot that I have 10 mana available to bring out a bunch of, zombie knights. It just, yeah. Knight of the Last Breath, also just a very bizarre card. It's 7 mana for 4/4. You can pay 3, sacrifice another non-token creature, create a 1/1 white-black spirit creature token with flying, and then it has Afterlife. When this creature dies, create a bunch of spirits with flying. This card also was just kind of a bizarre choice in this deck. It does have some synergies because you can you can block something that's huge it gets afterlife. You can bring it back, so you have a bunch of chump blockers and you have flying and stuff like that. But it was just like, there's just better knights that synergize with the rest of them. Whereas this is just like, a blocker that creates other blockers. Knight of the White Orchid, amazing. Black Rose has a monarch sub theme. I didn't think that this was necessary. Because once you become the monarch, then you are the target. And then its other ability is whenever someone else becomes the monarch, if you were the monarch, they lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. Like, who the hell? Who cares? It's 2 life on a 4 when everyone has 40. Liliana's Standard Bearer, also a very bizarre card. It's a 3/1 with flash for 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, draw X cards, where X is the number of creature cards that died under your control this turn. So this is I can now refill my hand when everything is dead. Okay. Like, if I had 3 mana available, I would use Unbreakable Formation, and be in a much better spot than having a bunch of cards in my hand. Murderous Rider, also something that I was a little apprehensive about. It is a 2/3 with lifelink, but when it dies, you put it into the bottom of its owner's library rather than the graveyard, and you want knights in the graveyard. So I don't like it. Just, there was no point. Order of Midnight. The Altar Fate is kind of interesting, but again, you want to have stuff in your graveyard. Smitten Swordmaster, I believe, is the only card with adventure that I kept in here. Sir Eleonora. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Spells. It has Ward 2, but for some reason it's not Ward. I don't know. Maybe this was before Ward was named. The way that this deck works, you don't generally have a lot of cards in your hand at the time that you are attacking, unless you have some other creatures that we'll talk about. Because you're looting, so you're not actually like adding additional cards. You're drawing cards and then discarding. So, like, at best, you're looking at like a 3/4 for 5 that draws you a card. Kind of underwhelming at that point. Sir Conrad, amazing card. Valiant Knight, great card. Vidalian Wave Knight, amazing card. Vona, Butcher of Megan. 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink with for 5. You can tap, pay 7 life, destroy target non-land permanent, activate only during your turn. Really cool card. I could get behind it if it were an instant ability. The fact that it's at sorcery speed, really, I guess it's not really sorcery speed, but the fact that you can only play it during your turn kind of like breaks it for me. Like, I can see the lifelink replenishes the life that you're paying in order to use this card, but if it didn't have activate only during your turn, I would totally have kept this card. Wintermoor Commander, Death Touch. Toughness is equal to the number of knights you control. Whenever it attacks another target knight, gains indestructible until end of turn. I believe I still have this card in here. Worthy Knight, whenever you cast a night spell, create a 1/1 human creature token. I think I took this out. And then Zarek Strobe Knight, you has flying vigilance, and then you can tap to create only if you've cast 2 or more spells this turn. You don't generally play multiple spells. So this is kind of slow, and I ended up taking it out. All right. So this is the Precon. So everything that you get from Cavalry Charge. It's really good. According to this, it's about $91. I think it's probably a little bit more than that, but pretty good for a Precon. I believe you can get it for about $45, maybe $50. But this is my version of it. So generally, we have one more knight in here, or one more creature. It's actually not a knight, but that's okay. Sorceries are, I believe, we have 2 less sorceries, but we moved them over to the instants. We have less artifacts, but we have a lot more enchantments. And then we've also fixed the mana base, so we don't have to have 39. You've inspired me to finally figure out my cuts for the mill deck. There you go. By fixing the mana base, you do not need to have 39 lands in here. And that's just by just putting a little bit of money into the lands to make it better. So the first thing that I did was I added the battle bond lands. They are kind of expensive, but battle bonds are just... yeah, I know. We do need to play. But I also need to pump up Reshi's mic a lot. But anyway, battle bonds. So Morphic Pool, Sea of Clouds, and Vault of Champions. These are kind of pricey. They did go down a little bit because Commander Masters reprinted them. They're still kind of expensive, but totally worth it if you're willing to put in the money. Same with Rafine's Tower. Rafine's Tower is an amazing tri-land that also has cycling, but it has the land basic types in there. So it's a plains, island, swamp, which means that Knight of the White Orchid can tutor for a plains such as Rafine's Tower, also Prairie Stream. I included the checklands, so Glacial Fortress is in here. Same with Drowned Catacomb. And we also included Secluded Courtyard and Unclaimed Territory. Unclaimed Territory is an amazing card. Same with Secluded Courtyard. And these are not that expensive. And I believe that there was one other card that I included. I included an Isolated Chapel. It's another Czech land. So, and the Obscura Storefront. This is a new competitive land, very cheap. It's just essentially an Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse, except you gain a life. You can also see that I cut down on the number of basics that we have in here because I believe it was 6, 8, and 5. Now we're down to 3, 5, and 3. So this is by far so much better. You have access to lands that don't come into play tapped. They are all tapped for colors that you need, and you're just gonna have a much better time because there's always gonna be times when you I need a mana right now. You draw a land and then it doesn't come into play tapped. Yes, a Blood Moon would ruin my day, yes. But luckily I have some enchantment hate. The other thing that I've done is I've included a number of enchantments in here that help me draw cards. And one of the things that I've kind of learned over coming back into Magic and playing it is that, spells that allow you to draw cards are really good, but they have that one-time use unless you have some sort of instant recursion or copy effects or something like that. Whereas enchantments, there's not a lot of enchantment hate, especially in Commander. Sometimes there are players that have enchantment hate, but not all the time. So you can play something like Teferi's Ageless Insight, which has huge synergies with your commander, because anytime that you attack with a knight, you will automatically draw a card. So now you're drawing, instead of looting, you're now drawing 2 cards and having to discard 1. And this just happens all the time. It's only 1 extra mana, 1 to 2 extra mana that from like a standard draw spell. Reflections of Lijara allows you to make more knights every time that you play a knight card. Now, this doesn't occur when you cheat out a knight from your commander, but every time that you play a knight from your hand, you're able to copy it. Kindred Discovery. Whenever whenever a knight enters the battlefield or attacks, you draw a card. Amazing card. Granted, it's $13, but like, this card is so much better in term, like, because like every time that you play a knight, every time that a knight attacks, every time that you're cheating out a knight, you're drawing cards. It's so good. Anytime that you pay the 2 to discard a card and create a 2/2 knight, this procs Kindred Discovery. Concerted Effort. I just happen to have 1 lying around. I'm super glad that I did. This is really great because like now all of the knights like specialized abilities now synergize with each other, because this allows you to have give all of your knights flying whether you have your commander. Same with First Strike, same with Double Strike, same with Vigilance. I don't have anything that has Trample or Protection, because unfortunately it doesn't include Ward, Lifelink, Death Touch, I believe. Those are the ones that are not included in Concerted Effort, but really, like, it's such a good card. Giving everything Vigilance, Flying, and First Strike just by having your commander out, it's amazing. So one thing that I wanted to kind of make sure that we keep the mana base completely fixed and never run out is we included a Sword of the Animist. Allows you to search for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped. So really good. Same with Stoneforge Masterwork. I don't know why this was not included, but basically it's just a typal synergy card. So equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature that's on the battlefield that you control. Sorry. We already talked about Herald's Horn, Conjurer's Mantle, Vanquisher's Banner. This is one of those cards that it's just kind of expensive, but like at the same time it is pretty good because you get the Anthem effect, and then you also get to draw a card. I had an Urza's Incubator lying around, and I was waiting for a typal deck to put this in, and I felt that this was probably the best one. So all of a sudden, all of your knights are now 2 less to cast, and there are a lot of knights, and they would be more than happy to remove 2 from their casting costs and bring them out. So not only can you, because one of the things I've learned playing this deck is that until you give your commander Double Strike, you do kind of feel a little slow bringing out 1 knight at a time. So like being able to do this, being able to play a knight and then also cheat out 1 really feels good. And Urza's Incubator allows you to make it a little bit cheaper. Same with Herald's Horn. And then all of a sudden you're playing 2 knights and then cheating out a 3rd one. Like that every turn just feels great. Circle of Loyalty, also a very odd card that they did not include. Just seems like the perfect card for a knight tribal deck. Costs 1 less for each knight you control. You get an Anthem effect.
whenever you cast a legendary spell, you create a 2/2 Knight creature token with Vigilance, and you could just pay 4 and just create one. If you're not, if you don't have a bunch of legendary cards in your hand, which generally there's not a whole lot of legendaries. There are a few, but and then the card that really is just kind of seals the deal and it's just stupid, and it makes the game absolutely crazy. And that is Coat of Arms. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one type with it. This card is absolutely bonkers. It makes for absolutely ludicrous games. And you'll see with Alonda and Azor, like you can create a bunch of Vampire Knights, and that just pumps up everything else. And you now have lifelink blockers that just are huge, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. So for the instance, I kept the exile cards, and then I added a few more cards that allow me to keep my knights in play as much as possible. So we have a Chroma's Will, allowing me to give my creatures flying, double strike, vigilance until end turn, or lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors. I believe I got this from my red-white token deck. I did not pay the 20. I did not buy this single. But yeah, fantastic card. Wish it would be printed more often so it's not $20. Cover Concealment. Also, don't understand why this was not included. It has Convoke, which is really nice. So if you have a bunch of knights that are untapped, you can phase them out and use them to reduce the mana cost of the spell. Flawless Maneuver. Fantastic card. Should have been included. Basically, it's just Unbreakable Formation, but you can cast it for free if you have your commander out, which generally you're going to do in order to make sure that this, if there's like a board wipe or something like that. So then we have our sorceries. So in the Precon, the sorceries were draw spells and board wipes. Like that's all this was. So we've changed that up a little bit. I kept Fell the Mighty just because it was in there. I've never found a time to ever use this. We may end up cutting it for something a little bit better. Same with Crippling Fear. Crippling Fear, I thought would be a really good add in here, but what I've ended up noticing is that generally, if there is something that is a wide thing or something that I really need to get rid of, in board wipes, they're generally over 3 toughness, and it doesn't do me any, it doesn't do enough for 4 mana. There is the I believe it's 7 mana where you just it's just a better version of this. It's destroy all creatures that aren't the chosen type. So you would just choose knights and then destroy all the creatures. That might be something I might look into. But again, it is 7 mana instead of 4. We'll see. Buried Alive. Fantastic card. Synergizes so well with this deck. Basically, you now get to tutor 3 knights. You throw them into the graveyard. Now, all of a sudden, your commander now has prime targets for his secondary ability. So, turn 4, you play your commander. Turn 5, you attack with him. You play this before your attacks so that you can bring out Alonda and Azor, Silverwing Squadron, Adeline. You bring out your best creatures and put them into the bin that you don't already have in your hand, and then he can cheat them out immediately on turn 5. Really great card. Again, why wasn't this included? I don't know. And then Patriarch's Bidding, really fantastic card. Again, also, why wasn't this included? Each player chooses a creature type. Each player returns all creature cards of that type chosen from the graveyard to the battlefield. So if, for instance, you have to use Fell of the Mighty or Supreme Verdict and board wipe, or there is a board wipe that you could not protect your knights from, and they are thrown into the bin, you have Patriarch's Bidding as a contingency right there. Moving on to the creatures themselves. I'm not going to go over... and we're just going to highlight a few of them. So we have Adeline, amazing card. So it's her power is equal to the number of creatures that you control. She has vigilance. Whenever you attack, she does not have to attack. Like, let's keep this in mind. It's only when whenever you attack with any creatures, you create 1/1 white creature human tokens that are tapped and attacking. So you can just continue to pump her up, or you could just throw her down, and you attack with someone, probably your commander, and then she will just create 3/1/1s. And then that'll pump her up. Now, granted, most will chump block. It's fine. Or not chump block, but like block them, kill 1 or 2 of the humans, but one of them will get through. IR's Oathsworn. This came out in the Aftermath. Great card. It's 2 mana, 2/2 with Menace. So really good at coming out and then attacking you. She gets a +1/+1 counter every time that she attacks until she has 4 +1/+1 counters. And then you can tutor up a card. Generally, I've never been able to actually get the second ability to trigger. However, it doesn't matter because it's a 2/2 with Menace that grows every turn. Battle Angels of Tyr. This was I think the most expensive card that I purchased for this deck. It's 4/4. For 4, flying with Myriad. Myriad means that whenever it attacks, it creates tokens of itself that are tapped and attacking the other players. So every time that you attack, it creates 2 additional tokens of itself. And then when it deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card if one of those players has more cards than you, or more cards than any other player. Create a treasure token if they have more lands than any other player, or gain 3 life. So unless you are just completely popping off and winning over everyone else, one of these abilities will trigger, and so you manage to get something off. It's just a fantastic card. Black Lance Paragon. It's nice if you have. If you need to give something Death Touch and Lifelink, it has Flash. It's pretty decent. Cavalier of Night, really great card, especially to cheat out. It has Lifelink. When it comes into the battlefield, you can sacrifice another creature and then destroy another target creature an opponent controls. And then when it dies, you bring a converted mana cost creature of 3 or less onto the battlefield. So basically, you cheat this out. You kill off one of your cheaper creatures that you had played just to attack, and bring this out. And then if this dies, you can bring out that cheap creature that you used to destroy something else, and then you can just have the cycle continue again. Changeling Outcast, not a knight. However, it has every creature type. It cannot block or cannot be blocked. Perfect card, perfect synergy. One of the best 1 mana cost cards in here. Dauntless Bodyguard does work, but a lot of times it's a good hate card, and it's 1 mana, so it really doesn't matter. Essentially, when it comes to the battlefield, you choose another creature you control. You can sacrifice the bodyguard, and that creature gains indestructible. So it's good for, like, say, your commander to kind of protect it, from any sort of board wipes or single target removal, stuff like that. Londa and Azor, just amazing card. Exsanguinator, Cavalry. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and create a blood token. Blood tokens allow you to loot. So you pay 1, sacrifice the blood token, you draw a card, then discard. Forsworn Paladin. Again, it's a 1/1 with menace. I've never used the 2 to pay 1 life for create a treasure token. It does make sense, but it's just never come up. Guardian of Faith is another thing to protect from board wipes. It has flash and vigilance, and whenever it comes into play, any number of target creatures you control face out. So if there's a board wipe, you flash this in, you phase out all of your creatures, and this will die from whatever board wipe is happening, but you then get to keep your board state. Hakon does make this is just a fantastic card. You can either cast him from your graveyard, which, like, your commander synergizes with it because he immediately throws them into the bin. And then, so you can cast him from your graveyard, and then if he is on the battlefield, you can just cast your night spells from your graveyard rather than from your hand. Kinsbale Cavalier, amazing card. Night creatures you control have double strike. Just gives everyone double strike. Great. Knights of Dust Shadow, if there is a lifelink deck out there, this will shut that down. Otherwise, it's not. It's mostly just there as another cheap knight, and you can pump them up if needed. I believe that's mostly it. We have Kwande. So any creatures that you control that has first strike now have double strike. Really good with the commander, because now your commander has double strike, which will trigger his second ability twice, meaning that you can you can cheat out 2 creatures instead of just 1. Metallic Mimic, another shapeshifter you call for knights, and then any knights that come onto the battlefield get a +1/+1 counter on it. And then Silverblade Paladin, just another thing that gives something double strike. And finally, we have Rafine. Rafine makes this deck pop off like you wouldn't believe. So what Rafine does is it has Connive X, where Connive means that you essentially loot for X. It is based on the number of creatures that you attack with, and then so you have to draw, and then you have to discard, and then as long as you discard non-land cards, those creatures get +1/+1 counters equal to the number of non-land cards that you discard. This creature is disgusting. You will see it in standard a lot. There's a lot of Rafine decks. I've seen even Rafine commander decks out there, but this card is absolutely disgusting, because all of a sudden you're not looting for 1, you are looting for 5, 10, 15 cards, putting 8 to 12 counters on your commander, which is going to be lethal for a lot of players very soon. And you are putting in, you are molding your hand to the cards that you exactly want. So you put in, you get your Patriarch Spinning, you get your Flawless Maneuver, you get your Path to Exile. You have those in your hands, and you dump all those excess lands that you need, because this deck is pretty low to the ground. And then all the expensive cards are just going into your bin, which you get to tutor up anyway. So it really does not matter. Rafine is absolutely an amazing card. It is the only non-knight card that is creature that's in here, and it does not matter. So this Rafine is absolutely the linchpin, and it's only $4. So, lastly, we have invasions. I think that invasions are a little underrated. I kind of understand the reservation, but especially because I don't know. You have so many creatures to attack with, and not necessarily you're going to go for lethal. You're just going to explode, and so it really isn't that bad to attack with, especially if there's there's a player that's just behind. You throw them the battle to protect, and then they can't really do anything. But at the same time, I can kind of understand that you definitely don't want to be attacking these with your commander unless everyone has flying for some reason, which has happened before. Generally, you want to make sure that every turn you are dealing combat damage with your commander. But Invasion of New Phyrexia, when it ATPs, you create X 2/2 white blue knight creature tokens with vigilance. It's fantastic when you have Metallic Mimic on the battlefield, or Coat of Arms. There's just a lot of synergies that you can do. But yeah, you just one card creates a bunch of knights. You flip it over. You have Cavalry of Zhalfir. You can loot for 2, or what I usually just end up doing is just you pay -2, and then you get the emblem. Knight creatures you control get +1/+0 and have ward 1. Emblems are something I don't know so they are permanents that no one can interact with. So and technically you can have 2 of them if you really want to. But usually I just immediately -2 him, and then someone's gonna hate on him, and then he'll be dead. But that's totally fine, because now all of your knights have ward 1, and ward 1 is fantastic for any sort of hate. So and then this one, I took out the D-Spark and put Invasion of New Capenna in here. So when it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact or a creature. And when you do, you exile target artifact or creature and opponent controls. So kind of felt like this was more or less the same. I don't really care if I just sacrifice a creature, because I can usually just get it back anyway, and there might be an ETB effect that I would rather have coming back. I'm still on the fence with this one, but we'll kind of see. And then the Holy Frazzle Cannon actually has a lot of good synergies with it. So you attack it for, I believe, 4. Yeah. And then whenever equipped creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and each other creature you control that shares a type with it. Well, you have a bunch of knights, and so all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of 1/1 counters on your knights. So there's some good synergies. Maybe D-Spark is just overall better. I just felt like the limitation of a mana value for a greater just kind of felt too much for me. But and then yeah, so you can also see here that I fixed the mana curve, because the mana curve was all over the place in the Precon. Again, I feel like this was generally in part due to the belief that you can just cheat out a bunch of cards, but and then also the mana itself was just all over the place. So it's 18% is blue, but 44% of it comes from your lands, whereas only 41% of it comes from your black sources. It's just, yeah, mana was just really bad here. So curve, much better, as you can see. So even if you're not cheating out everything, it's a very smooth curve. And then we did fix it a little bit. The consequence of it, so by taking out a lot of the draw sorceries, we took out a lot of the blue that was necessary, and basically the only thing that we really need to make sure is that we get out our white sources as much as possible. The reason why it is at so high at 54% is just because we have so many duels out there. But this deck plays very well. Like, the synergies are like immediately apparent on here. The only thing that you need to get used to is the looting effect. So you need to be totally fine sending creatures to the graveyard, sending unneeded mana rocks to the graveyard, and like, when do you keep your removal spells? When do you keep your protection spells? You gotta have to have that feel for it. And then also stuff like Knight of the White Orchid. When do you play Knight of the White Orchid? Like, especially, like, you have a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to be playing first. However, sometimes you're not always going to be able to hit your lands per turn. You can also make sure that you play Knight of the White Orchid before you put your land drop in, so that you get the benefit. And unless someone is playing a landfall deck, then generally Knight of the White Orchid is always going to be triggering. So it's just stuff like just little nuances like that are really going to help. But this deck is so easy. I don't want to say easy. It's there's not a whole lot of pitfalls with this deck. It has the synergies. They make sense. Like, anyone could pretty much, like, as long as they have like a pretty general knowledge of Magic and how to play, you'll pick up this deck and you'll immediately understand what the strengths of this deck are, what are the limitations, and I think you'll have a good time. So we're going to throw this up on YouTube. Please let me know in the comments what you like, what you don't like, what changes you would make on this deck. And we'll see you next time.